Hopefully y'all can see me and hear me. We're about to do our Valentine's Day virtual class. So a few of y'all purchased kits and will be taking the class along with me with all of the goodies that I have sent you so that we can decorate these pretties. If you're hopping on just, to see what this is all about, that's cool. So we won't be, okay, I think we're good. So if you're taking the class pre-recorded on YouTube, you can skip ahead if you would like, pause, whatever you need to do, go at your own pace. If you're taking it live, of course, we're gonna walk through step by step through the class. We'll have a couple of breaks in between. If you have any questions, you can let me know in the comments. Feel free to say hi, tell me what you're up to. Where are you taking the class? Are you at home? Are you with loved ones? Whatever you want to comment, I will see it as we go and I will answer as we go. So, I don't see anybody commenting. So if you are taking the class, go ahead and comment just to let me know that you're here. We'll get started very, very soon. You're going to want to have a pair of scissors and also a bottle of water, like a little bowl or a cup of water, just a little bit. I just filled this container with water. For the part where we're going to use the paintbrush, we need a little bit of water. You may need a couple extra napkins. I'm going to leave that up to you. I think I gave you 3 napkins, so that may be totally fine. But the water part and the paintbrush can tend to get a little bit messy, so just make sure you have those napkins on hand. You'll also want your toothpicks, and you're going to want to take everything out of your box. All right, I'm going to silence my phone. So, welcome to Jackie Sweet Schoolhouse with cookie kits from Jackie Sweet Shapes. As you probably already know, they are sister companies now, which is really, really cool. And I'm Jackie, and I absolutely love Valentine's Day. It is probably one of my favorite holidays. And we've been doing a lot of Valentine cookies this week, so I actually got to make a lot of these ones because just people ordered them. They wanted the same ones that I did in the virtual class. They wanted to order these ones, and so I feel more prepared than usual. Typically before a class, I'm not making a whole lot of the designs that we actually do in the class, but this week in particular, I have made quite a few of each of these cookies. And so I'll try to go slow. I'm not going to go too fast, especially if you are a beginner. And again, if you have any questions, comment. I will try to answer them as we go. Okay? So, how is everyone doing today? Let me know in the comments section. We have about 2 hours together. I'm not sure that we're going to use all of the time because we're dealing with intermediate and beginner cookies, I would say. So like this heart right here, it looks fancy, but it is a little bit more of a beginner cookie. However, the polka dots make it a little bit more intermediate. If you've ever done polka dots before, you know why I say that, because they look easier than they really are. Polka dots are just one of those things. I find you either hate them or love them, and I love them, so I use polka dots a lot, but it is a lot of hand-eye coordination and just getting that technique down. This one right here is probably beginner to intermediate. Even, the hearts kind of look fancy, but they're not super fancy with the technique that I use. This one as well is definitely intermediate. And then the lips, I would say, are more beginner. So these are the same ones that I advertise from however long ago, a month ago. And yeah, they're definitely not edible because they've been just out exposed for like a month, so they're definitely rock hard. But we will do each of these. So if you haven't already, take everything out of your box. Okay, you're going to want to lay your little parchment paper flat. Can everyone hear me all right? I don't see any comments yet, so if somebody will just comment and say, hey, I can hear you, then that will let me know that we're ready to rock and roll. And I'm going to silence my phone. All right. I need to take everything out of my kit as well. So, Valentine's Day next week. I'm wondering if anybody has any plans. We kind of sort of have plans. Oh, great. So my mom and my dad are taking the class. Hi, Mom, Dad, Grandma. We have plans to go see Grandma. I don't know if she knew this or not. Next week and hang out with her for, I think, like a day or two, depending on work and how my husband's back is doing, because he's been injured. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm looking forward to that and maybe going on a date or something. All right, I put these in your box if you want to wear them, cool. If not, nobody will know. I won't be judging you. So we have everything out of our box. If this is your first time, I always like to explain the icings here because it is very important for the rest of the class if you know sort of the basics about just the consistency of the icing and sort of what we're working with here. I did a Royal Icing 101 class a couple weeks ago, and we went over extensively the consistencies. And what I found was that I even, as I was teaching it, was learning a lot, but just learning how to kind of explain a little bit more really what's going on with these consistencies and why they're so important. So your gray color right here, it probably has a Sharpie line on it, but it's a medium consistency. So you can use it to detail, outline, and flood with it. It's sort of like a not really too thick, not really too thin, somewhere in the middle. So it kind of sets, but it takes a little bit longer to really set. But you can also do some details with it without it like running off, like just like spreading onto the cookie. So it does kind of keep its structure a little bit. If you haven't already, the gray one, just kind of massage it a little bit. I know I had this in the instructions, but the thin ones, so this one and then the ones that don't have a 1 on it, can tend to, over time, just kind of like the water will separate from the icing. And so if I made them a few days ago, which I did, they tend to not be as mixed in as well. So I would take pretty much the gray and then each of my colors that doesn't have a 1 on it, because you'll feel it's kind of thin. It's like a little bit more liquidy. Just kind of massage those ones for a little bit just to make sure the color is all mixed in. Okay? Alright, so the ones that have a 1 on it, as you're massaging these ones, I'm going to talk while I do this. The ones that have a 1 are a thicker consistency. So that means that it's always your first step and your last step. Those ones are always going to be the ones that you use to outline to create a barrier on your cookie, and then they're always used at the end to do the detailing. So our thin ones go somewhere in the middle. Once that barrier is up, then we can plop the thin icing in to create what's called flooding. So it drops in and we spread it. It sets. It looks beautiful. It's satisfying. It's fun to do. So that's the thin, but always remember, number one, the ones that have a line, Sharpie line, these ones are going to be your thicker icing. First and last step. Oop, I almost dropped the camera. So let's start with our worksheet. And I'm going to teach you how to hold it. Again, if this is your first time and you don't know anything about cookies and decorating, this is going to be a pretty important step. However, if you've taken a class with me before, you know the drill, you know how this goes. If you want to jump ahead, you can. But I always like to just treat it as if somebody's coming in brand new, never done a class with me before. All right, so let's take our white that has a 1 on it. Okay, you don't need to massage this one really because it doesn't have as much water in it, so it's not going to like separate from the icing because it's thicker, so it kind of keeps its structure a little bit better. But I like to lay the tip flat. It doesn't really matter where that seam is. You'll notice a seam in the bag. Doesn't really matter where that is. But we do want to cut a little hole. So when we go to cut a hole, we want to cut off about the width of a pencil lead is what I always say. So if you can see on the TV or phone or whatever you're using, laptop, it's about that much. So it's just a tiny little amount. You always want to start smaller, and you can always cut off a little bit more. You don't want to go in and take off a huge chunk because then you can't make the hole smaller. You could put it in an extra bag, which I have sent you those. But we want to go for something kind of small. So when I cut this off, where'd it go? That little triangle? Who knows? Shoot. The little triangle is going to be like a number 2 pencil lead that popped out, if you remember that like in grade school, because who uses number 2 pencils anymore? Not me. So you should have a hole, a little hole. What I like to do before I start is run my fingers on that tip because I just laid it flat to cut. So I want to look at it and I want to be able to see a good hole. Like it should look like a hole and not just a flat line. All right. Couple of things here. When you hold your icing bag, I'm going to teach you the way that I hold it, and you can feel free to do whatever works for you. As you do it more, you'll kind of find what works for you. But every time at the top there's a knot and the icing should be, pretty close or right there. I take my hand, spread my fingers out real big, and I place this right here where my hand's going to be right under the knot. And then I take my thumb and just kind of tuck it right into there so that I'm right under the knot. My icing is spilling out. And I'm going to be right on top of that icing with my hand. So into the palm, you're squeezing that thumb into the palm. So you're kind of squeezing more from like your palm and not really your whole hand or your fingers. I like to tuck my thumb in, and then I just fold my fingers over and rest them. Okay? So this is just what I do. You feel free to do what you want, but just like here. And then you're going to take your pointer finger on your other hand, and that's going to be right at the base here to kind of steady that hand, give you a little bit more control with this. Okay, so we've got dominant hand, just like so, and then your finger here. As you can see, my icing is spilling out a little bit. That's totally fine. That's why we have the napkins. But we are going to try to do the worksheet here. And so sometimes just for the sake of teaching, I don't always have that finger right there just so you can kind of see it better. However, I want you to practice on the worksheet, starting with the lines. We're practicing gaining control, practicing hand-eye coordination. Biggest tip that I can give is to make sure you're letting that icing drag so that you are about 1 centimeter off of that paper. Sometimes I'm even as much as like 1 inch up off of that paper. So you're really just letting that icing kind of fall onto the paper. You're not touching that piece of paper with the plastic tip, because if you do that, you're going to get a smudged outline, and it's not going to create this barrier that you really need for the cookie to have that flood icing inside. So you want it to be puffy and as, tall as it can be for that barrier. And the only way we really do that, yes, the way we cut the hole, but mostly that we're letting that line just kind of drag onto the paper here. All right. I'm going to do both sides here. When I start and stop a line, this is a question I get asked a lot. I do that's the only time that I really touch the paper. So with the tip, I kind of touch it to start, I lift it up, I let it drag, and then I dip back down and touch the paper again to end that line. So if you feel like you're having trouble stopping that line, or you're like, how do I stop? And then you pull it away and it's just this string of icing. That, trust me, I've been there. I know what it's like. So to stop that line, you kind of dip down a little bit, stop squeezing, dip down, and pull up, and then you should be able to stop that line pretty easily. It's only a couple times in and I've already got icing all on my gloves. Oh boy. When you feel confident, you can move on throughout the worksheet here. They do get a little bit harder, so I would say lines are probably the easiest. And then you're just working on that control on these little loops. Again, I'm a centimeter off of the paper. I'm letting it drag. And then I'm also, as I'm like in the air, I don't know if you can tell this, but I'm sort of manipulating that icing and where I want it to go while it's in the air. So I'm using hand-eye coordination to kind of see where is that icing line about to fall. And then if it's not going to fall in the right place, I kind of like move my hand to basically move the icing to fall where I want it to fall. So that's one advantage of having your icing bag up and not touching the paper, is you can actually kind of like manipulate it so that it can land where you want it to go. Okay. The next one, the squiggles. I'm just kind of going at my pace. You might be ahead or behind, but it really doesn't matter. We just want to kind of practice a little bit, gaining some of this control here. All right. And this part does take practice. This part is probably the hardest one, is the working with the thick icing and just detailing. The way that you're going to know if you cut the right amount is if your white line completely covers that black line. And I don't mean like if you made a mistake like I did and you can see the black line because I didn't place it perfectly or whatever. That's not really what I mean. What I mean is the width is going to be able to cover the width of the black ink on the paper. So if you can see the black line or you're nowhere near the width of the black line, you're going to want to snip off a little bit more. More likely than not, people will cut a little too much off, and so be mindful of that for the next one that you snip off. If you are really thick and really covering that black ink, you probably cut off a little too much. So then on the next one, just try to cut off a little bit less so that we can have a smaller hole. You do have an extra bag as well, so if you need help with transferring, like if you do cut too big of a hole, that's why I gave you the extra bags, so that you can transfer that icing to the new bag and have like a fresh start. So comment if you need that and I will show that. Most of my people who have taken class before actually already know how to do that because they've done it many times with me in class. The circles are tricky. I tend to come up about 1 inch off of the paper for these, And that's because I'm really trying to manipulate that icing to where I want it to fall. So if I'm up in the air, I kind of have an advantage because I can sort of like scooch it as I see where it's falling. Oops, that one was not in the camera, so let me do it again. So sometimes I go clockwise, sometimes counterclockwise, but I'm pretty high up off of that paper because I'm watching it. I'm seeing, okay, where is it gonna fall? And then do I want to try to manipulate it in the air to get it where I want it to go? Sometimes you can also take your toothpick and sort of push it to make it perfect, or even if you want those lines to kind of connect more, I'll take my toothpick and sort of like push it in to make those lines, the starting and the stopping lines, more together. All right. And then the hearts. Every time that you turn a corner, so like if you're doing a square, or a heart is what we're about to do, or like a triangle, you have these like sharp turns, right? So just in the same way that you would start and stop a line, you're going to do the same thing with like a heart. When I start, I'm going to dip down, I'm going to pull it up, and then as I turn a corner right at that point on the top or the bottom, depending on where I start, I dip down and then I pull back up. So I'll show you that if you're like, what did you just say? So I'm here. So to start, I kind of dip down, then I pull up, and then I'm just going about like I was in the circle. But then here, I dip down, and then I pull back up as I change direction. So it'll make sense when you do it, but sometimes it's like, how do I change direction? You have to have that point where you sort of stop to kind of let that icing fall down onto the paper or the cookie, and then pulling back up as you continue on. Okay, I'm going to give you all a few more minutes. I wanted to note, I forgot, I got a new logo for my Jackie Sweet Schoolhouse. Stickers just came in the mail like a few hours ago. Super excited. So I got an apron. I don't even know if you can see it, but it has my logo on it, and I'm super excited about it. So I had somebody on Etsy make this, and I was pretty happy with how it turned out. I mean, we didn't really spend like a lot of money or anything. So it was like $50, and she literally designed it. Like, I told her what I wanted. I said I want like a schoolhouse with like an icing bag and flowers and watercolor and all this stuff. And so she created this logo, and I was really excited about it. So business cards are coming. We're gonna have stickers. It's gonna be great. I'm so excited. All right. So hopefully this helped. I always say that hopefully this gives you confidence to feel like now you can do it on a cookie and feel like you're not clueless as to what is going on. But just to have a little bit more hand-eye coordination, this is something that takes time to really practice and to get. So, you know, if this frustrated you, it's okay. It does take time to really nail this technique down. But we are going to try it on a cookie. So our first one is going to be our ruffled heart. And this is where you're actually going to need your paintbrush as well as a little bit of water. Okay? And I have to get my cookies out. Alright, so paintbrush and some water. We don't need like a whole lot of water, but we are creating this sort of like lacy look. The only difference is that these paintbrushes were like, I don't know, 10 cents at the dollar store. So they really are not good paintbrushes. So if you choose to do this like you know, actually, like a lot of my followers do cookie orders, and they just take a class just to learn how to do it. I would say don't use a 10-cent paintbrush from the Dollar Tree. Use like an actual good paintbrush. However, for this class, I'm using it because you're using it, and so I didn't want to just have this fancy, you know, paintbrush. But you can still get the same exact effect and look. I'm gonna show you on my cookie. I'm just gonna do a couple and have you watch, so don't do it quite yet. Watch me first and sort of what I do, and then I'll do the whole cookie and we can do it together. But just so that you can see what it's really gonna be like. So we first have to have everything ready, and that is our water, our cookie, of course. We're gonna have our white icing bag that we were just using with the line on it. And then you're gonna wanna have some sort of napkin, towel, something, because as we dip our paintbrush in water, we're also gonna use the napkin to kind of like dry it if we put too much on. So let me show you here. I'm gonna do the top two scallops, I guess, the ruffles here. And so we're going to outline in white, and this does not have to be perfect, but you are trying to get as close to the edge as possible, but I'm just gonna show you two. So I take my paintbrush, I dip it in a little bit of water, and I want it to be wet, but not like soaking wet. And after I dip it in water, I'm literally gonna take my paintbrush and sort of like run it into the cookie. Now, again, this is kind of hard because for one, I'm literally doing this over a camera. So that camera is all up in my space, but that's okay. You're taking your wet paintbrush and you're coming from outside and kind of pulling in to create this sort of like sheer kind of lacy effect. Now, if you have too much water, what's going to happen is it's just going to like pull like all of the icing and sort of like smear it into the cookie. So you don't want that, but you also don't want it to be too dry to where you're not pulling anything. So like on this one up here, I had too much water. On this one here, I'm getting crusts of sugar icing, so that means I didn't have enough. So it's sort of like finding this line, like this balance. Did I put too much water in? And if you did, you can always just start over. So if I'm like, nah, I don't like the way that looks, fine, I can do a little bit more, and then I can try it again. So you're sort of like wanting to not be perfect, like just taking the paintbrush sort of at random times and like pulling it in, and then being aware if it starts to kind of crust over, go ahead and add more water and that kind of thing. This does take a little bit of time, and again, not the best paintbrush. So if you are a cookie artist and you're like, this is horrible, go get a real paintbrush. But I was able to create this exact technique with this paintbrush. So it just takes a little bit more time, kind of playing with how much water you need to have, that kind of thing. So go ahead and take your icing, your white icing with the one on it, and outline all around this cookie. We're going to do all of these little bumps here. You can do a couple at a time if you want. And then, like, so I'm just going to do a few here. I'm going to rotate my cookie so that it's facing directly in front. So when I pull down my paintbrush, it's just right above me. And then if you're feeling like you're really not getting much, go ahead and add another layer of that white icing on. Okay. So, like, I might do 2 layers here. This is going to take some time. So, take your time. Kind of have fun with the technique. Try not to get too frustrated. Again, finding that balance. How much water on that paintbrush gives you the perfect look? Like, that was perfect what I just did. So however much water was on my paintbrush was perfect. And so, but there's really, you can't really mess up here, because if you put on too much water, just put on more icing, dry off your paintbrush, and do it again. So we want to create sort of this like sheer kind of lacy look here. Again, with a nicer brush, it does look better, but still getting the same technique, same look. Sometimes I dry my paintbrush and then I go back over kind of lightly and just sort of, because the bristles or whatever they're called on the brush are what are creating sort of those like little lines that we're going for. It should kind of look like, well, it kind of reminds me of like going to the beach when that water kind of brushes up on the shore, and then afterwards it has all these white foam bubbles. It kind of looks like we're sort of creating that, like the cookie is our sand and the ocean is coming in and it's giving us this little foamy, lacy sort of look. So taking some time here, totally fine. Again, thicker outline is going to give you a little bit more icing to sort of pull into the middle. So you could always go back over it again and do another outline and more. Like, I definitely put too much water on that, so I'm gonna go back over it. Pull, lightly pull. When you get a good one and you're like, ooh, that was a good one. How much water? What did I do? It's always kind of exciting. Someone asked, is it easier to do all the edges first, then do the stuff with the paintbrush? So sometimes it might be easier if you have a better paintbrush, but the thing too is that the icing will dry pretty quickly. So sometimes if you do it in steps, like if you do a few ruffles first, then it doesn't dry up as quick, and then you don't have to use as much water and all that, but you're gonna end up getting the same look, so it really doesn't matter too much. And then what else? Oh, what kind of paintbrush would I recommend? Well, definitely not this one, but I already said that. At Hobby Lobby or Michael's or Joann's, they have this like paintbrush section, and they literally have like thousands of paintbrushes. I have a couple. I don't know the brand, to be honest. I can show you what I use since I'm in my cookie room anyway. I use something like this. So you want something that, for this effect in particular, you want it to be kind of thicker. You don't want like a really thin tip, but kind of a thicker bristle here. And I think I got this one at Hobby Lobby for like $3. It's a Princeton brush. Interesting. So that kind of does give you that better effect. You can still understand the concept with the 10-cent Dollar Tree brush, but it doesn't look as good. So when we're finished, we want to have a look that's kind of like this. Something that is sort of like about a centimeter, because then we're going to go with our pink and outline and flood. But we still want to see that white there, so we're not, covering the whole part, just about a centimeter or so. All right. See if I can. All right. So, was that enough time? Hopefully, is enough time for y'all. I think there's only a few people actually taking the class live, so I might go a little slower, just because I know that if you're taking it on YouTube, you can jump ahead. No problem on that. You can pause and do whatever you want on YouTube when you take the class pre-recorded. And so, yeah. Again, if you're not happy with it, you can go back over. Water is going to pretty much like wipe away whatever mistakes you have. So if you dip it in water again, it'll like redo it. Or you can add more, but it dries pretty quickly. Like it's already pretty much dry to the touch here. Okay, so next is our hot pink. So we first want to outline. So which one, thick or thin, which one is used at the beginning and the end. Didn't hear an answer, obviously, but it's going to be the one. The thick is the one. I know you would have said that if we were in person. So we have our hot pink color. You're going to snip off the amount that was good for that worksheet, remember? So if you had your white and you remember how much you snipped off, if it was perfect, you're going to snip off that much again. All right. So, here we go. Got my little triangle this time. So, I don't know if you can see that. It's pretty small, There we go. About like that. And then again, you hold it the way that I taught you. And then make sure that that hole is a hole and not a flat line. What we're going to be doing here is creating this outline. However, you're making your own line, so you are going with the general shape of the heart, but you're covering up some of the white, but not all of the white. So you're still going to be able to see a little bit of that cookie underneath. That's kind of the point. So whatever that means for you, it does require a little bit of hand-eye coordination, because you're sort of looking, whoop, that was an air bubble. We can work with that. You're sort of looking at the outline of the general shape of the cookie, and then you're also looking at wherever your little ruffles were. But know too that you can always take your toothpick and sort of manipulate that icing. Like if you want it to come out a little bit more, kind of push it out, or you want it to come in. So you kind of can work with that shape if it's not exactly perfect. But we still are leaving, you know, about 1 centimeter of that white around the edge. Okay. We're going to let it dry for a little bit before I show you the next thing here. All right. Any more questions? Everybody doing all right? Okay, I'm gonna put my hair up. All right, so you're going to have your hot pink thin icing as well as your light pink. It's not white, it looks kind of white, but it's sort of this like super pale blush pink color. Definitely not like a pink, but it has a little pink tint to it. So we want the thin of that color, the blush pink, and then we also want the thin of the hot pink. And I'm going to show you those polka dots. And believe it or not, once we do this technique, this cookie will be completely done, which is not very often that the very first cookie that I teach, we start and stop all in one sitting. So these are going to be polka dots. I'm going to show you, just like I did with the lace, watch me first and then do it. I promise you it'll make more sense if you watch me and then you do it. So we first want to make sure we have everything that we need like kind of ready to go, because this is called a wet on wet technique. I posted a video of it on Instagram a couple of days ago. Oh, this week, Tuesday. And wet on wet just means that while one base coat is wet, then you go and you add another color of the same consistency, that thin wet icing, and then you are doing it before it dries. So what you get is a very like flat visual effect. Like the details are not raised, they're not two-dimensional, they're just all kind of like into the cookie. It looks really smooth and really cool, and it's not too hard. The polka dots are a little hard, but in general, it's pretty easy. So I'm going to teach you this. However, make sure you have everything ready. We want a toothpick, okay? We want both of our thin icings for the hot pink and the blush pink. We're actually gonna go ahead and cut a hole in both of these. Our hole is going to be a little bit bigger than what we've been doing with the outline, but not too much bigger. Okay, so just a little bit bigger. Let me see if I can get it in the camera. About like that. So, whoop. So you want it to be about that width right there. Okay, and we're gonna do it for both. Just try to err on the side of being a little bit smaller rather than bigger. If that makes sense, try to cut off a little bit less than maybe you think you should. Okay, so we have our toothpick, we have this one cut, we have this one cut. So watch me first. I'm gonna flood the icing, the hot pink icing in there, and while it's wet, I'm gonna add the light pink polka dots. Okay, so a couple of techniques as I do this. This icing is very thin, very, very thin. It is just going to fall out. For beginners and when we're dealing with polka dots, I like to sort of work from the outside, spiraling in, and I do leave gaps, especially if you're a beginner, because we don't want it to over flood. So if we put too much, it's gonna over flood into our white. We wanna put in enough that we're not sitting forever with the toothpick, but we put in enough, we have some gaps, and then we take our toothpick and sort of push it all to the outside outline, okay? And then, like I said, while it's still wet, you're going to take your icing, make sure there's a hole in it, and then we're gonna add these polka dots. Number one tip with polka dots, we let that icing fall. Our plastic tip never touches the hot pink. We let that icing fall, and when it's a little kind of like a ball of icing, we dip down and then we pull up. We let it fall, we pull up, but we're never actually getting that tip into the hot pink. Let it fall, pull up. So right on the surface here. Because if this tip gets into the hot pink, when it pulls it up, you're going to get hot pink coming up, and it's not going to give you that boom polka dot. So that's it. That's it. So if you follow that tip, letting that icing, you don't even have to squeeze. I promise it's going to fall out. Let that icing fall. As you see that little ball, dip it down, pull up, and then it should give you a nice little dot. So if you haven't already, go ahead and try this out. And let me know in the comments if you're taking the class, or I guess even on YouTube you could comment. Let me know what you think about the polka dots and if you love them or if you hate them. Just remember those techniques. Somebody asked, you have smaller bags for icing. Is this something you recommend instead of larger bags? Actually, the bags come pretty large. This is the bag. And then in order for the class, I just cut them after I tie them. So bags are actually bigger. I just make them smaller for the class to be like little cute personal icings. So just remember, when you add polka dots, you're adding extra icing in So that's why I usually put it in and spread it with my toothpick. I don't always use my toothpick, very rarely, or my cookie scribe, as they call them, which I now sell, by the way. And I love making them. It's like making jewelry, but for cookies. So you're using your scribe because when you add the polka dot, you're adding in more icing. So if you think of it, if you already have a lot of icing in there and you go to add the polka dots, you're adding more, and there's a higher chance for it to overflood. So we got in the pink, adding the polka dots. Polka dots can be hard. If you are upset with your polka dot, you can pick it out with your toothpick and try it again. Especially when it hasn't dried yet, there are definitely tricks you can do to try to like correct mistakes. But after this part is done, your first cookie is complete. Isn't that awesome? Yay! All right. So icing typically takes, like, to dry completely, icing takes about, when you live in the South, 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours. Sometimes I've gone 24 hours and it's still not completely dry. In this class, the top coat starts to dry after 2 minutes of being onto the cookie. So literally right now, the top coat's already starting to dry. It will be, the top layer will be like completely dry, not like the whole chunk, but just like the surface of it will be dry by the end of class. So in like an hour. But you always want to allow 8 to 12 hours. If you live up north, maybe less, like 4 hours to dry, before you package it or put the details on. Of course, for this class, we do it all in 2 hours because we know that that surface is dry, like pretty much right away, within the hour. Okay, I'm assuming that everybody who's taking the class is done with this cookie. Very, very carefully move this to the side. This one is done. You can put it in your bakery box if you want. Just try not to bump it or like shake it or move it too much. Carefully scooch it over into a safe spot. All right. Next one you're going to do is going to be this guy, which is probably the more advanced one out of the four. All right. This is not exactly the same cutter. I actually freehanded this one, but you can kind of see what it's going to look like. A little love letter. Aww. So what we need is going to be our thick white icing. These bags are what you call tipless bags, so that means you don't have to buy the expensive Wilton metal tips. We do everything without a tip because super easy. You can throw away the bags when you're done. You don't have to clean the tips. They're cheap, pretty much, relatively cheap. And so these are perfect for all of your icing needs. And the only thing I use a Wilton metal tip for is when I do a rose. Like a star tip, that's the only thing I use it for. Okay, on to the next one. This one's a little bit tricky. Okay, so take a look at your cookie. I'm going to point out a couple of things. So we want to create a rectangle. So about where this toothpick is, it's sort of like over here on the right. It's right after this little bump, which will become a heart. And it's also right under the left bump, but not like directly under it. You're going to be right under that right one and a little under the left one, if you can see that. We're going to create a rectangle with our thick white icing. I'm going to start right here on this right side. So right under where that little bump is, that's going to be our starting point. And we're going to follow the edge of the cookie If you can't do this all in like one motion, you can do one line and then take a break and then continue on. Or you can try to do it all in one, remembering that technique that when you turn corners, you want to dip down and pull up. I am working right under a camera, so I am taking my sweet time because I don't have quite the space and the range of motion that I normally would with this. On that left side, we want to come up, but we're going to leave about 1 centimeter between that line and where that next bump is. So your cookie should look something like this at this point. Okay, and then the next thing you're going to do is just a straight line across. A little hand-eye coordination, looking where you're going to meet that other line right there. If you end up not liking that line because it's not straight or something, you can definitely like pick it off with your toothpick and do it again. So you could just go, meh, I don't like that, and just take it right off and do it again. This is the point in time where you can correct those mistakes. The only time that you really can't is when you have already done the base coat. Then you really can't change that. You can't fix those mistakes. All right. The next thing, this one's a little trickier. So we want to have sort of like a letter, like an envelope. This envelope is opening, and these hearts and all this love is just bursting out of it, which is awesome. But we have to create those lines for that flap of the envelope. So we're going to cut off all of those bumps, which will end up being our hearts. However, we need to have the white. So we're going to sort of follow this line here. I'll show you with the toothpick. You're going to cut off these hearts, and you're going to cut off these hearts. So we're doing a triangle here. Top, cut off the topmost heart, and then cut off the little bumps on the right side. And there you have your top of your envelope. Okay. So my mom said my heart looks like a kidney. I'd like to see a picture of that. It's funny. All right. So once you have the outline, you can add the flooding, then icing. This is the best part. Now, we don't want to do both sections. So right now we have the top triangle and then the bottom rectangle. We don't want to do both of them because we want that definition between them. So there's always this concept that if you let one section dry before moving on to the next one, then it'll create sort of this like block, and when it dries it looks really cool. It gives you some definition and some separation between the two. So we're going to do the bottom one first. So just the bottom rectangle is going to get this thin icing. So go ahead and cut your white. Okay. And now, if you would like to, you can do this with, like, if you're afraid of over flooding, no worries. Just don't go all the way to the edge. But you do want to put enough icing in there that you're not going to see the cookie underneath. You want this to be like a pillow on top of the cookie. And then you want to spread. You should only really be spreading, if you choose to go this route, you should only be doing this for about 30 seconds because the icing does quickly start to harden when it's exposed to oxygen. So you have about 30 seconds. If you're sitting here for forever with it, then you'll want to add more icing in, because we don't want to be here forever. We also take our little toothpick and we pop any air bubbles that there might be. Another trick that does help with sort of these air bubbles is to very lightly, don't go crazy on me, very lightly kind of tap it and maybe shake it. That brings those air bubbles kind of up to the surface so you can see them and then you can pop it. So satisfying. Popping. So white is the one color that you see air bubbles the most. I don't know why or what that's about, but yes. So just try not to shake it, tap it too much. We don't want to break it. We don't want the icing to fall off. All right. And again, just the rectangle, not the triangle, just the rectangle. Okay. We're gonna let this dry. We don't want it to get messed up though, but we do want to move on to another cookie, so we're going to carefully put it somewhere. Maybe I usually just kind of move it to the top. We don't want it to get messed up. Be very careful when you're moving it. We're just letting it dry, just for like 5 minutes. So move it to a place that it's going to be safe. Right. Okay, next one, moving right along. Let's do this heart. Looks like it's got a little arrow coming through here. And so this one is going to hopefully look like this when we're done. Okay. Trying to see if I can make my face smaller. Oh, usually my husband helps me out with all of this stuff. That's fine. Alright, I just want you to be able to see more of the cookie, but that's okay. So, what do you think is going to be the first step here? Think it through. So, we've got the details are last, so everything that kind of looks like it's on top and sort of like finishing the look is a detail, and that happens last. So we do have this pink, this light pink heart, and we will want to outline and flood the pink heart. So the next thing we're going to do is grab this one, the blush pink, not the white. Make sure it is the blush pink. And you're going to cut off a little piece on the end because we're going to outline the heart. The heart is a little tricky. It is the one on the left that I did looks really pretty. But then when I was doing these for like orders this week, I just could not get it to look that pretty, and I was like, what did I do to make it look so good? I don't know. But we are cutting off this part right here, this arrow. We're not doing that. And then we're right here. Now, we're cutting off that. We do have to create our own lines right here, but that should be easy enough because we can kind of see where that heart is going to be. So it doesn't matter where you start here. just somewhere near the edge, and then cut off that point up there. And around. Let that icing drag on. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips here. So for my cookie, that outline is terrible. That's okay. Again, if I don't like it, you can wipe it off, do it again. A lot of times you're kind of at the mercy of the shape of your cookie. So whatever happens in baking, like, it's gonna affect the shape of your cookie. So this cookie doesn't look as perfect as the one that I use because it's spread a little bit in the oven, which we try to avoid it, but hey, it happens. So we kind of are just working with what we've got, right? We're trying to make it look as best we can while still following the edge of the cookie. Now, I'm going to tell you the little tip. Sometimes, again, this just has to do with baking, but sometimes you're not going to get like a super flat surface on your cookie. And so a lot of times what I'll do, if I see that like one part is sort of like dipping down a little bit and it happens to be at the edge of my cookie, which is terrible, like I know for a fact if my cookie is like this and I go to add that icing in, it's gonna fall kind of towards wherever it's going down. So like if I'm looking at this cookie, I'm kind of like seeing, okay, this cookie is not perfect, and that's okay. And a lot of times I have my assistants, they roll out the dough, and they are actually the ones that do all the baking for me because I have so much decorating to do. So a lot of times I get cookies that they're not really at my level of standard. Not, that sounds so bad. That sounds so arrogant. I just mean I've been doing this for 6 years. They've been doing it for a couple of months. So they're not always going to get this like super perfect flat, cookie, and that's totally fine. Like I don't really care because there's ways that you can fix it. So if you ever have that problem, what I do is I go back over and I add another outline right on top to kind of like in whatever spot that it's kind of lower to now even it out. So now I've got that extra barrier, so I don't have this one part to be down. Now I'm like, okay, I add another little layer on top of that side, and now it's more even. Works every time. I don't have to throw out that cookie or eat it. So I can still decorate it even though it might be a little bit lopsided. That might have been a lot of information, and if you don't bake cookies or don't really care, you're like, well, yeah, whatever, who cares? But sometimes people really do care about that, and so that's just something that I do to, fix that issue. Okay. By the way, my assistants are great. I just have, I've got a new one. I have a girl who comes on Mondays. She just started. I've got a girl that you'll probably see me, if you're on like social media, I probably post about her because she works about 20 hours a week for me, and I'm trying to get her to work a little bit more. And then I've got another girl that just started yesterday, and she's great. So they've been helping me, and they are awesome. Like, it's really cool to see them, just enjoying it, and they are like, this is the best job ever, and I'm like, yes, it is. Now you see what I get to do every day. It's a lot of fun. Okay, we have to flood this one. This one is just getting the blush pink. Remember, it's the thin one, so don't go grabbing the one that has a line on it. The thin one, we're going to flood this. Again, if you don't feel confident about, it not over flooding, you can go right up to the edge as you spiral into the outside to inside. You can use that toothpick to sort of push it. Just make sure you do it quickly and you have enough icing in there that you're not sitting there forever with the toothpick. A more advanced technique, which I'll show you, is coming right up to that outline, hugging right next to it. You can only really do this if you know exactly how much icing needs to go in, because sometimes people will put too much and it will overflood. But then what I do is I don't even use a toothpick. I use this tip of the icing bag to be my toothpick. That way I can get more done. I'm not, having to deal with 2 different tools. I'm just boom, 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 because it is quicker, but it can be a little bit harder, especially if you don't know how much to put in. So again, we're looking for sort of that pillow of icing on top of our cookie look. And we don't want to see the cookie underneath. We are kind of trying to hide the outline with that thin icing. Hide those mistakes if we can. Pop any air bubbles. Alright, and then this one, we're going to let this one dry as well. So, as we're letting the letter and the heart dry, we've already got one of the hearts done, which is super exciting. We already know that we have one done. Very cool. We are then going to do the lips, and the lips will, we won't be able to really like start and stop it all at one time because we do have those sections that are close together, so we have to let it dry a little bit. But pretty much it's a beginner cookie, so it's not going to involve like a whole lot of technique. But we do have a few techniques that I'll show you. Let's move this guy up carefully. Don't let it bump anything. And then we're going to grab our lips. It's the last cookie. Here. This is where we get to work with that gray. That is not my favorite consistency because it's not thick, it's not thin. So let me just say that outlining is easier, but flooding is a little bit more tricky. However, we're only going to be using it for the middle part of the lips, and we're also going to use it later for that heart. And again, there's a little bit of like color disfiguration because it's like a month-old cookie. So over time, the colors do tend to sort of like bleed and not look as good. But ours is going to look great. So the middle gray part, it's just a little, like 2 centimeters or whatever in height and about 1 inch in width. So we're following the edge of the actual lip cookie. So if you can tell, the bottom, this is the same right here as the outline of the cookie. The top, this is the same as the outline on the cookie. So that'll kind of be our reference point. Take your gray. Again, make sure, if you haven't already, to kind of massage it a little bit. Get those colors worked in so that when it comes out, it's not real liquidy. Because it is going to be thin, but it's not going to be as thin as the other ones. So when we cut that hole, we're cutting the same amount as the outline. Even though we're also flooding with it, we don't want to cut too big of a hole. So we're just snipping off a little piece here. Number 2 pencil lead amount. Okay. Sometimes with these ones, since they tend to be a little finicky in their consistency, I just take my napkin and make sure it's coming out and it's good to go. Alright, making a mess over here. I don't know about y'all. Okay, so we're following the edge of the cookie. Somewhere in the middle, we're going to follow the bottom part. Kind of look for that like halfway, like where is the middle of the cookie? And then sort of wherever the middle is going to be the middle of this gray part. And if you mess up on this, you can always wipe this off because it's not detailing yet. We're going to cover it with the red, so if you don't like it, you can pick it off with a toothpick and do it again. But then the top part, again, we're going to mirror what we see on the top of the cookie here. That actually looks pretty good. I'm really proud of that. That's not every day that I'm proud of that. You can do like mine. I kind of went for like more of like a puffier, like mouth is kind of open. But if you want, you can do like a smaller gray. It's supposed to look like the opening of the mouth, like she's kind of puckering up. So you can make it small or big or whatever. And again, at this point, if you don't like the way it looks, take it off with a toothpick, do it again. I happen to like how it looks, so I'm going to leave it. And then we're not going to cut the gray anymore. Hopefully you have, kind of like a small hole, not too big, not too tiny, but not too big. And then we're going to take the same gray and we're going to flood it. We don't want to use our toothpick at all. So we're going to squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. We're hugging right up to the outline. We're letting a whole lot of it come out, but we're getting it all in. We don't want any gaps or holes whatsoever because it dries very quickly. And then we're going to help it kind of set, helping it out by giving a little tap and shake. Because it does take a little bit longer to set. All right. So when you're dealing with like the medium consistency, you just want to get that icing in as quick as you can. Spread it as quick as you can because it's just difficult to work with, for sure. All right. Anybody got any questions? So next up is going to be our thick red icing. Thick red. So again, which one is the thick red icing? Is it the one with the line on it or the one without? Ding, ding, ding. Assuming that you said you got it right. It's the one with the line on it. This one is our thick icing. So we're going to outline with this one. Cut off a little bit. Hopefully you're getting a little bit better at like knowing how much to cut off. That is a tricky thing. It's how much do I cut off? I kind of know because I've just been doing it for so long, but there are times where I cut off too little or too much. It's easy to mess up when the hole is so precise. But as long as you feel like it's keeping that icing in, it's giving you good details, which you haven't got to yet. But as far as, if it looks right and it doesn't look too small and it doesn't look too big, you're probably in the right range. All right. So what we're going to do first is create the lines in the middle going from the gray part out to the corners of the lips. And I sort of did like a little curved line to give it a little bit more dimension. So I'm starting over here, right at the gray. I want to be touching the gray, and then I'm going to give her a little curved line out to the outside of the cookie. I'm going to do the same thing on the left. And I'm actually, this time, since I'm right-handed, I'm going to go from the outside and then like a curved line to the gray. I just want to make sure that the gray and the red are touching so that I'm getting that barrier. I'm not leaving room for the thin icing to just kind of like tuck under it or seep through it. So I want to make sure that it's really touching that gray icing and it's acting as that wall for that thin icing. Okay, now we can do the rest of it, which we already can see it. We're just following this little outline. Doesn't matter where you start. I always say that wherever you want, whatever floats your boat. We're just going the outline of this cookie here. Making sure that those lines, if we are starting and stopping lines, we're not doing it in one fluid motion. We want to make sure that we're not leaving any gaps for that icing, the thin icing, to seep through it. That's it for that. So, let that dry for a little bit. We're going to put in the top or the bottom lip. So you're only going to do one segment at a time. Top or the bottom, I'll let you decide. Again, we have that wet on wet technique. You can do this if you want or not. It's a little tricky. It's a polka dot that's then dragged. So you're dropping in. It's like supposed to look like sort of the glare, like she's got like glossy lips. So it's like the glare of the glossiness is going to be white. So if you choose to do this, this is how we're going to do it. You're going to put in the thin red icing on the top or the bottom, but not both. One segment at a time. Then you're going to take your thin white icing. You're going to drop in a polka dot, and you're never going to touch the red again with that tip, but as you're dropping it in, you're then going to kind of like squeeze out so that it kind of creates this like teardrop look right there. So that's what we're going for, but we'll see. So I'll do it mine first, and if you want to look before you do it, by all means, that is totally fine. I'm gonna move this one. Not enough space for y'all. Okay, so we have not opened up this the thin red. So we want to make sure we cut it, ready to go. I'm probably gonna do the top one first. So if you want to watch me first, you can. This part's gonna look pretty normal. Sometimes it's really hard to get into those corners, so if your tip of your icing bag does not fit, you can just go like right to like here and then use your toothpick to get into that tight corner. So get it all in, take your toothpick, use this so you got into that tight corner. Now this is where, take a moment to watch me. Hopefully I don't mess up. So we do a dot and then we drag it out. You can definitely like use your, if it's clean, you might have to clean the bottom of this toothpick. You can sort of manipulate it a little bit as long as you're only touching the white. But you can manipulate it a little. Very tricky though. That is not the easiest thing, I will say. Dropping the polka dot in and sort of like you have to stop squeezing. Like you shouldn't really be squeezing at all because it's just gonna fall out anyway. So you just let that polka dot fall, and then as it's falling, you sort of like take it and just spread it towards like the side or down. And then hopefully you'll get this like nice little streak, but it isn't very easy, I will say. If it looks horrible and you're like, oh no, I'm not doing that. Just take out like the whole white part with your toothpick and then add in a little bit more red. If you're like, I don't like this white, whatever this is, just take it out with your toothpick put in the red. Don't even worry about it. Your lips don't need to look glossy. That's fine. So try that out, and then we'll move on. It is fun. Like, once you get the technique, it's hard, I would say, but once you get the technique, I would say it's fun to sort of be able to, do little things like that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And you definitely could add that white streak at the end, which would probably be easier. So there's always, options if you're having a hard time, still want to get the effect. Okay, we are coming back to the lips soon, however, not right away. So I'm going to move him over just a little bit, but I am going to be back very, very soon. But I want to make sure I get my white icing into this guy first. So grab the little letter, which should be somewhere up on the side or on the top. Okay. The rectangle is now dry enough that we can add this top part, and still when it dries it'll look like blocks, separate blocks. So that's what we want, and it looks dry enough. I don't advise touching it to see, but it's dry enough for, obviously it's not dry enough to like poke it or anything, but it's dry enough to add this next one. So nothing too crazy here, just dropping in this white icing. Again, you can use your toothpicks to get into those tighter corners. How do I only have one toothpick? I thought I had, it's, woo, buddy. Woo, that's never happened before. Sorry about that. Oh boy, so sorry. Okay, it didn't mess up. Wow, that was crazy. Alright, it's gonna have to refocus, but I do need to get this icing in. Oh boy. Never a dull moment. Always something that goes crazy on these cookie classes, y'all. So, let me see if I can refocus it. So we got this in. There we go. Oh boy. So my lips and my letter were saved. However, this little guy up here, he kind of had like a little accident. Look at him. Which is fine. Oh, poor heart. Can't say that's the first time. That's the first time I've done it in a class, but not the first time I've done it in real life with cookies. So it's all good. We'll work with it. Alright, so we want to add the hearts to this, but we can't do that yet until this top part is completely dry. So we want to, again, put this off to the side. There's a lot of moving and letting dry. When I'm doing like a whole bunch of them, they're usually on like a baking sheet, like a baking pan, and I'm doing them in stages like this, but I'm not moving them. So like if you do like want to do more cookies, then put them on a pan or something that they can stay there. You're not going to be like, okay, next, okay, you're done, next, oh, now we're coming back. Like, you just have it on a pan. You do them in stages. You do have to still let them dry, but that way you're not moving and potentially messing up your cookies. So yeah, we're gonna let this one dry. So we are gonna move it. Just be careful when you're moving it. And then we're gonna actually finish the lips. So just that time alone, which is probably like 3 to 5 minutes, that was enough time for the top part to dry enough that we can now add the bottom part, and we'll still get that definition. If you lose the definition, you can still always go back and do like a thick Like you could go back over and sort of re-outline, as people like to say, if you lose this definition between the top and the bottom lip. Like this. See how like you can tell that it's separate, but I didn't go back over and create a line. This is simply happening because I let the top one dry before I added the bottom. So that's pretty cool. That's probably one of my favorite things about, like, probably one of my favorite, like, basic tips is just letting segments dry so that you can sort of get, like, that great definition. Okay. So if you liked that little teardrop effect, we're doing it on the bottom. However, instead of the right side, we're doing it on the left side, and we're doing it the other way. So we're doing dot in the chunky part and then spread it out towards the corner. All right. I'm surprised nobody made a comment about my mishap there. All right. So you can, this part right here, when you're up by the gray, you can hug right up to it, or you can just get really close and then use your toothpick to sort of like push it in. The toothpick does wonders. These are the scribes that I sell. Are like these toothpicks, except they're not disposable, so you can use them again and again. The scribe, you just have to like wash it. But people keep asking me, what are those little pins? Because they kind of look like pins, yeah, like safety pins or whatever, needles. That's basically what this is doing this. And then we're popping air bubbles. Remember, while it's still wet, you're going to take that thin white, grab the one that does not have the one on it, you're going to let it drop in, then you're going to pull it out. Ooh, getting messy. And then I might use my toothpick to kind of make it a little bit better. But I just have to be careful because that white is so close to the red. Trying to see if you can see it without the glare here from the light. Okay. So your second cookie is complete. Great, you're halfway there. Well, you're more than halfway there, but because we've already done a lot of work on the other ones. But we're halfway there. Glad there was only one minor casualty. I'm majorly spastic, so that's something that would totally happen to me. Yeah, I can tend to be very clumsy. I always make extras because no matter what, something happens, you know? Something, like, most of the time it'll be like my sleeve or like my hand, like as I'm decorating one, like I'll bump the one right next to it, and then all of a sudden I just have, it happens all the time. So I always make extra, and then sometimes I eat that, or I'll give it to somebody and I'll say, do you want the mess up? You want it? Like, because I just have all these mess up cookies just lying around. So okay, that is it for our lips. In like an in-person class, what I would like probably do at the end is have everybody like hold up their lips and like do like a picture. I don't want to mess it up because it's still drying, but that would be so cute to have like a group picture with everybody like holding up their little lips. I'm so proud of this. It's not really often that I look at a cookie and I go, I'm really proud of this, but I'm proud of this one. Okay, let's see, what is next? let's take a little break because we only have 2 cookies to complete, and we still kind of need them to dry a little bit. So we got like this one, and then this one, which I messed up on, which I might go ahead and do again. But this would be a great opportunity to use the restroom if you need to. Take like a 3 to 5 minute break, kind of like I would in an in-person class, except if you have questions, just message me or comment here, and I'll answer them while I'm on here. It's a good time to ask questions. Get some water if you need to. I'm assuming you're doing this from the comfort of your home, so whatever you want to do. And I will answer some questions. I'm probably going to do my standard door prize. However, this is not the usual door prize that I do, so that's kind of exciting. But I always like to kind of just, I know that a lot of people watch this, but they haven't bought a kit. Ooh, just kidding, you're not in trouble. But like, I like to thank, the people who do purchase the kit and then take the class with me. It's really fun. But I also like to just kind of thank them, so I always do a little door prize, and it goes, like, all of the people who purchase the class, they're the ones that get to be entered into the door prize. Don't mind me as I fix this little guy. So we will have a door prize, so just hang tight. I am allowing y'all to have a break. Ask me any questions that are burning on your heart to ask me. Oh, this is a good question. Do you ever use a dehydrator? So, if you don't know what a dehydrator is, it dehydrates like food. So you can make dried fruit in it, beef jerky. They even like advertise that you can make like yogurt, which was weird. But basically you're sucking out the moisture from cookies. And so if you put it in this thing, it's like a big black box. I bought I do have a dehydrator, and I bought it about, I guess it was like 2 years ago, because I was having issues with bleeding. So like my colors were like running into each other. So I did like a bunch of research, and I found that in the South it's really humid. So a lot of times like your colors will bleed because there's so much like moisture in the air, and then that affects like your cookies. So then your cookies have so much moisture. So I was trying to, fix this problem that I was having, and turns out it didn't really fix the problem, but I found something else to fix the problem. So then I just had this giant dehydrator in my house, and I still do, and I never use it. But I will say that there are times that I use it if I have a big order, if I'm in a little bit of a rush, or if I'm finding that my icing is just not drying like it's supposed to. Like maybe I had like the wrong ratio in my recipe, which is very possible because I don't measure my ingredients anymore with my icing recipe. I just go by how it looks. So sometimes if I don't have the right ingredient in there, that'll happen. So like I'll pop them in the dehydrator for like only a few minutes. Like it takes like a few minutes, and it just sucks some of that moisture up. So I would say, am I pro dehydrator? Not really. I think that it's a lot of money. It's like $200 for something that, I mean, if you've got money to spend, sure, why not? But there's other things you can buy, like a projector, an airbrush machine, which I got from my parents for Christmas, which I love, and I use it all the time. Thanks, Mom and Dad. But I would say those would be better investments than a dehydrator. Wow, y'all have all these questions. What sugar cookie recipe do you use? I do not give out my own recipe. So my cookie recipe, she might be watching it. I'm not sure. She joined on a little bit ago, but my cookie recipe is from a friend who used to do this, and she kind of got me into it. And she taught me one time, like I went over and she taught me, and she gave me her recipe and she gave it to me and was like, yeah, you can use it. So I use that, but I don't give it away. It was like her grandma's recipe, and it's really good, but I just have decided not to give away my recipe, and it's not really mine. It's her grandma, but then my royal icing recipe is actually my own. Like, I spent a lot of time perfecting it and getting it down. So I don't give out that recipe only because I haven't found anything quite like it online, so it's kind of like gold to me. Like, I really like my icing recipe. So if there ever comes a day that I stop selling cookies, like custom decorated cookies, then I might give it out. But for now, I don't do that. But there's one lady who's really good, and I get a lot of my other recipes from her. But she's called Sweetopia, Sweetopia, Sweetopia. She has tons of cookie recipes, and my chocolate recipe is from her, which is so good. So good. I've been digging the chocolate recipe, but that one is hers. I use that, and I freely give that. Obviously, like, it's not mine, but she is so good. She's got tons of cookie recipes, and I've tried. The pumpkin spice was really good. I've tried lots of different kinds that I just love, like, so good. So she's a really good person to, like, follow if you like recipes and all. Trying to get this in because I almost forgot about it. But we will come back and we're going to do a door prize. If you have any questions along the way and you ever want to ask me, message me. I will help you out the best I can. If I don't respond right away, it is because this is the busiest time of the year with Valentine's Day. So busier than Christmas, believe it or not. So I am kind of mega swamped right now, but if you give me a few days, I will be less overwhelmed. Let's see. My mom and dad are in the comments. So funny. Okay, so we are going to do a little door prize here. I gotta pull it up real quick. Pull up the list of names for everybody. Okay, so if you purchased a kit, you get entered into this little door prize. So what I'm doing tonight is something a little bit different. Whoever wins the door prize, going to be one person, is actually going to receive the cookies that I am decorating tonight, right now. Or maybe the ones that I've already done, that are already packaged and ready to go. But so I do have some of those. I've got a whole rack of cookies. The rack is completely full. But whoever wins this will receive 4 of these cookies made by me in time for Valentine's Day. So yeah, that's a cool prize, right? Okay, I just need to, usually I already have this list up, but it has been a crazy day. This has never happened. I'm kind of like ashamed of it, but I only got 2 hours of sleep last night. And I can't say I'm proud of that. I have never ever done that before. But with just these Valentine orders, I realized, I think I might have taken on a little bit more than I thought. I thought I could handle it, but it's been absolutely insane. So let's see. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna use a random generator here. All right. So the person who is winning these cookies, so 4 in time for Valentine's Day, is gonna be 1, 2, 1, 3. Yolanda, what is your last name? I just talked to you the other day. Yolanda, shoot, I don't know your last name, but I know who you are. Yolanda, that is so cool. You are gonna get these cookies. Awesome. Yolanda Thomas, there it is. So Yolanda gets 4 cookies. They will be shipped to you in time for Valentine's Day. So congratulations. Awesome. Okay, are we ready to move on? We have 2 cookies left. Right? I think we're gonna start on the little love letter, because this guy should be dry enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to be very careful when we're adding the details, because like I said, that top surface is dry enough for us to add the details, but it's not dry. If you poke it, it'll be messed up, as you could see from the camera falling on the cookie. So it definitely is not completely dry, but the top layer is dry enough. So what we're going to do are create these lines on this envelope here. Look like this. So take a look at it. The first thing we're going to do is the bottom, this little triangle right here. So that'll be the first thing. And then we might go the outer part. We're not going to do the top line, but then we are going to add these lines down here so it looks like an envelope. The diagonal lines actually meet sort of right below the tip of this middle one. So what I'm going to do is the first one I'm going to do is here. And then I'll probably do this, and then I'll do these. And we're going to do this with the thick white icing that has a 1 on it. All right. Man, y'all are asking so many questions tonight. This is awesome. Different than usual. Okay, how come I can't get to all of them? All right, so we have our thick white icing. Okay, we're going to do the bottom one first. So just sort of look at where about the middle would be of that rectangle. If you really want to, you can actually put a little dot, if that helps you for a reference point. But if you do choose to do that, then this line is going to come up to meet that dot and then down to their side. So you're creating this mountain up to the middle, back down to the bottom. Okay, we can, like I said, we're going to do the sides and the bottom. Re-outlining. We're giving this cookie some more definition, details, and a cleaner look. So you're sort of, a lot of people say they're re-outlining, which makes sense. You're sort of re-outlining these cookies, and they just make it kind of come together and look like you could, essentially you could have just done the triangle and the diagonal lines, but sort of re-outlining around it kind of makes it look cleaner. And then the last thing we're going to do is the diagonal lines. So you're going from the top and then in, but allowing a little bit of space for that bottom flap. So the lines are not touching completely at the top, they're just like 1/2 centimeter from the bottom there. Okay. The next part's pretty fun. The hearts. If you like the technique that I use, it's fun. If you don't, you can do, you know, something else. I'll show you a couple ways you can do the hearts. But if you have taken a class with me before, you've probably done this before, because I do use these quite often, these hearts here. You just want to have everything ready. So we're going to have our hot pink, our red, and our light pink with the 1. Everything with the 1 on it. Have those ready. Okay. And then you're going to create these hearts. So the hearts that I do, I like to do little teardrops. So let me do the red. Watch me when I do this. You can keep the hole as it is. I go, let's see, left side. Squeeze until I get the thickness, the width that I want, and then you kind of drag it down. So you're going to squeeze and then drag it. Did y'all catch that? I'll do it again. So you go left side, squeeze, and then drag down. Right side, squeeze, and then drag down. Super easy way to create these hearts. If you want really tiny, you barely squeeze and you just drag. Barely squeeze and drag down. So like that is how I did it on these ones. You are going to find on the actual cutter, which I'll show you in a minute. Oh boy, that's going to be a mess. You're going to see that we've got some big hearts. We have little hearts and we have big hearts. These guys over on the left are pretty big. So what I do is I literally just sit there squeezing until I get the right width, and then you drag down. But you can make it as big as you want. Like you can stay there with your hand and just squeeze, 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 let it all out, and then drag like at the last minute. I kind of like varied. There wasn't really any method to my madness when I did these, but I've got the red, the hot pink, and the blush. And then I just kind of like alternate sort of where I want to put these hearts, make some of them big, some of them small. The only real like defining hearts that you have, like definitively, whatever, is going to be this guy on the top. This one right here is part of the heart. This one right here. So that part of the cookie shows you there's a heart here, there's a heart here. But that's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then you kind of just put them where you want. So it kind of looks like these hearts are sort of bursting out of the envelope. And take some time. Think about where you want those hearts to go, or you can just follow mine pretty much verbatim if you want. Can do lots of hearts or a little heart. I'm trying to like get under the camera. I'll go around it. So again, squeezing till you get that width that you want, and then drag it down. Squeeze and drag. You can go over it as many times as you want. You can even use your toothpick if it wasn't quite perfect. And I'm going to do light pink up here. Squeeze and drag. Squeeze and drag. Take some time. This top part is smaller, so you don't have to squeeze as much. But see if you can kind of get used to that feel of that heart. It's like we're creating 2 teardrops and kind of connecting them together. If you don't like the teardrop method, another thing you could do is just simply outline a heart shape with this same exact icing. Just outline the heart and then just go ahead and flood it with this thicker icing. Doesn't have to be thin icing. You can create an outline of a heart and then just kind of like fill it in with the same icing. Lots of hearts here. Okay. Like what? How many do I want? I want to get some big ones and some small ones. I'm trying to follow it, but the ones that I have kind of like coming right out of the envelope, I didn't finish the drag, so I just sort of like stopped right where the line was. That's an option too, to kind of make it look like it's sort of coming out from there. Let me give it a big one right here. So how are we doing on the hearts? How's it going? The lighter pink will dry a little bit darker. Definitely. Not like a crazy amount darker, but they will all dry a little bit darker. Let me do red. Like every color dries like a shade darker. It's kind of like paint when you're painting a house or a room. You know how they always say, and the only way I know this is because we moved a lot when I was younger, and I remember my mom would always say, okay, you know, which color do you want? And just remember, like I remember her saying, just remember it's always gonna dry darker, like by a shade or two. So what you're seeing is not what you're gonna end up getting like all the time. So it is true that it does dry a little darker, but it's not like this blush pink will pretty much be, it'll still be a blush pink tomorrow. It won't be like invisible, kind of like it looks a little bit right now. It looks more like white. It won't be like that. I might have one actually in my baker's rack, maybe. I could show you, I'm not really sure if I do. Like one that's already dry. Alright. So I'm gonna leave it like that. Happy with that. Yeah, I think so. Maybe I'll add one more over on the bottom here. Like a tiny one. It also looks lighter in the camera. It's a little darker in person. Okay, after this point, you have finished your third cookie, and we are almost done, and we are also almost out of time. Perfect timing. I didn't even look at the clock. I'm like, oh wow, it's already almost time. So we have one cookie left, which is the one that I messed up. And we've got a couple of details here. Yep. We've got the arrow part. So hopefully y'all are done with that. If not, just pause. You can finish it in a little bit. And let's finish this one. Okay, good as new. So what we're working with here, yeah, this is a little bit darker pink on the top. It will dry a little bit closer to that color, but not just like that. All right, so we want to do two things. We're gonna do this part. We're gonna outline and flood this tail part, and then we're also gonna outline and flood this heart part here for the arrow. So those are what we wanna do first. So let's do the tail kind of piece first. I'm trying to think how to make this easy for you. So I was actually having a little bit of trouble when I was doing it. So let me change my mind and actually do the gray part first. I'm just thinking what I had trouble with this week was knowing where that heart and that tail piece kind of go. And so if we have the gray as like a reference, then maybe it'll be a little bit easier to really know where it goes. And so we're gonna take our gray, hopefully it's still like a small hole and not too big, but about 1 centimeter into the cookie, see how this is about 1 centimeter into the heart is where it's gonna start. So we're gonna do a line and we're gonna come just to where that like tail kind of looks like it's starting. So let me show you what that's gonna look like. So we're about 1 centimeter in, and then we go right to there. Not a very big line. And then the same kind of concept we're gonna do over here. The heart is gonna kind of dip down a little bit, so we're not gonna have the heart starting like here. We're gonna go a little bit deeper because it is gonna dip in a little bit. And then we do the same thing like that. Kind of symmetrical length in both of those lines. And then your heart, you're gonna outline. Just outline a heart, kind of going with the outline of the cookie, but then you have to sort of finish the shape up here. You have to create sort of your own shape. Outline a heart. And the cookie is gonna be exposed a little bit, this part right here. We wanna leave it like that. We're not gonna flood that part. And then the tail part, you can use white, thick white. So again, everything that's like outlining is gonna be the thick, so the one that has a 1 on it. This part's a little bit tricky, but since you have that gray as like a reference point, you're gonna start there and then drag it out and follow the edge of the cookie. So like this will be your point, and then you'll go, this one is a little tricky. I'm trying to think the best way I can like explain this one. Just kind of go with what you see me do, I guess. And then you're gonna go down, up, and then mirror that side. So it's like the cookie basically tells you what the shape is gonna be, but it's kind of hard to really tell. And once you do that, we do want to flood this little piece with our white icing, thin white icing. It's a small space, so try not to put too much. If you put in too much, You can also, sometimes what I do is scrape it out if I feel like I'm about to over flood it. Scrape it out a little bit. Okay. And then you're also going to want to flood. Did I almost seriously do that again? So then we're going to want to flood the red as well. So with your thin red icing, again, try not to add too much in there. It's a small space, so we don't want to over flood it. We're going to drop it in. Use that toothpick. Just a couple things left here. Little design on the tail and a little design inside the heart to make the arrows really kind of look like they're going through the heart here. That's it, just a couple more details. So you want to grab your hot pink thick icing. So again, the hot pink has a Sharpie line on it. If you have like a small hole, that's good. If you end up cutting a little bit of a bigger hole, you might not be able to get these two lines here like the finished product, but we are going to try our best to get these, like, I guess it's 3 lines really, but you're going to outline it again, and then 1 line down the middle, 2 lines down the middle going towards the side. So you got, first just outline the whole thing. This just kind of brings the colors together. It gives it that little pop of hot pink. Like we have in the other ones. So we do the outline first. A line straight down the middle. And then if you can fit it, if not, maybe not, but if you can fit it, we're going to do a line straight down the middle. Straight down the middle. Okay. And then the last thing, I'm going to do this tiny little line, kind of curved, to make it look like it's going through the heart. It doesn't have to be curved if you don't want it to be, but the heart, the heart one is going to be kind of like a C, like not really a C, but it's kind of like curved towards the middle, and then the one up here is going to be curved also towards the middle, different direction. Or you can just do a little line, but we just want it to be a dainty little line there and there. Alright, I'm going to manipulate this one to make it look like it's really touching the arrow. Alright, and that is it. Yay! So, always have a couple of closing statements before you go. So, if you haven't finished, of course, you can finish after the class. I do have a picture posted of these on Facebook, on Instagram, if you want to see a visual of it. But let them dry. I mean, if you want to eat them right now, cool, but they do sometimes taste a little bit better when they're dry. I think so, for whatever reason. But you can keep the icings if you have enough. The icings are good for up to another 2 weeks. The cookies, if you want to wait a little bit longer, they'll be good for up to another 2 weeks. You can just put them in like a Ziploc bag and a Tupperware, or both, Ziploc in a Tupperware, and you can have them for up to like 3 more weeks, yeah. Once the icing is on it, they'll last for 3 weeks, and they'll still be fresh for 3 weeks. Pretty cool. I do have, if you enjoyed this, I do have a Mardi Gras virtual class coming up, and I also have a spring virtual class coming up, which is going to be like flower themed, very cool. And then I also am working on, after Thanksgiving, after Valentine's Day, I'm going to be posting a St. Patrick's Day virtual class. So it'll be like a little leprechaun. It's really cute. It's this 3 cookie set, and that'll be a virtual class. I'm also going to be in Baton Rouge next month at the beginning for a crawfish boil themed class. So if you happen to be in Baton Rouge and you want to come to that, awesome. I'll be doing cookie classes in Gainesville, Florida for Easter. That's in the process of happening. So like me on Instagram and Facebook. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to check one time to see if there are any additional comments, but doesn't look like there are. So message me if you do end up thinking of anything else that you want to ask. I'll be happy to help. Enjoy. I hope you had fun, and I hope you have a great Valentine's Day, whatever you end up doing. Hopefully you have fun, or just hopefully this brightens your day. And my motto is, our sweetest shape is your smile. And so I just am happy that you're able to take this class, and hopefully it made you smile. So have a great night, y'all, and let me know if you need anything. Good night, and happy Valentine's Day once I stop streaming.